city, and a city slicker who knew how to read it for them. How could they do that?
Because I'm saying maybe we have a current halacha that was based on.
Yeah, it was the halacha then to the Yerushalmi comments on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, he did a whole long shir. And then he finished up with something very interesting. The Gemara says that this is no longer applicable.
Yeah.
What happens if you are Yazger just flew to Australia?
Right.
I don't know the timing, but assume that the flight is more than 12. It's more than 12 hours.
It is.
All right. So you get on the plane at 3 in the morning. And you land, or going back, whatever direction. The point is, it's not possible for you to land in Megillah on Purim.
Right.
And you know that in advance.
Yeah.
You could do it on the Monday or Thursday. That's the current.
Wow.
I never knew that. I just learned that last night. But I'll send you the.
Yeah.
He usually posts it Friday morning, and with his weekly mailing.
Yeah.
So I'll send it to you. It's
nice.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And I mean, like Rabbi Kiva Emden says that the city slicker says the Gemara word by word, the Megillah word by word, and the people in the Kfarim repeat the words after him. So all he is a prompter. But Yonah said that can't be, because now you're saying it bal peh, and you can't say it bal peh.
Right.
So I mean, it was a fascinating shir. Did you ever listen to him? I sent you.
Okay.
He's not he knows his stuff.
All right.
Is there what? No, he didn't do that.
Okay.
That's what they are. I hear.
All right.
You don't know. I mean, I have a trust that I'm leaving behind, so they could pay my.
All right. I'm a little fablunged here, but we'll get going momentarily. All right. All right. Let me start at least with the learning sponsors. Year of Learning, Suanar Nigaralik, in memory of Malcolm Proman and Philip Mann. Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch and Beryl ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch. Yosef Meir ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch. Henya Rivka Pro Rosna bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch. And in memory of family murdered in the Holocaust, Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Sharon and Fred Liska, their family and many friends. In memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edel bat Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan. In memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell, Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Friends of Avi Gidler, Avramea ben Shimon, and Martha Gidler, Chana bat Yeshaya. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov in her memory. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim, Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata bat Asher. Friends of Nina Moynester, Nechama Asna bat Yitzchak Aharon. Many friends of Stephen Vigdor, Lezecha Nishmat Simcha Melech ben Meir Leib Halevi. In Month of Learning by Rebecca Lewis and Susan Wotonsky, in memory of their aunt and sister Miriam bat Yosef Devora. A Week of Learning by Edith Vigdor, in memory of her father-in-law Meir Leib ben Dober, by Michael and Judith Poretsky, in memory of his brother Avram ben Gershon, by Mira and Herschel Sennett, in memory of her mother Shosha bat Avraham Alevi and his mother Reitza bat Yitzchak Yaakov, Clara and Jonas Wazer, in memory of her father Moshe ben Yisrael HaKohen, Oscar and Shelley Mole, in memory of his mother Rachel bat Naphtali and his father Shlomo ben Yitzchak. Okay, on the 20th, Walter and Sippi Fried, in memory of his mother Dina bat Zev. Today, 22nd, Moshe and Carol Gassner, memory of his mother, Mirbat Yaakov Zev, on the 22nd. Also, Lisa Paleyev, her husband, Harav Yisrael. I know. Her husband, Harav Yisrael ben Harav Moshe Aaron. What? And Mayor and Miriam Karkowski today on the 23rd, in memory of his mother, Gidl Bas Zev. May Shemas have an Aliyah, Crank Rafia, Velta Yeshua Shema Tzliah, and the Chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Gebench Yan. Okay. All right. Now, if somebody can tell me where we're supposed to be today.
I told you.
I know you did. I got to mark it off on my.
We're the last line on Yud in the middle of the line.
The last line on Yud Amud Beis.
Yes. Interesting word.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Almost the exact center of the line.
Yes, I have the place. Yes, I have the place. I have the place. Okay, I did not know whether you were going to stop there. Otherwise, I would have done a quick review. Okay.
It's just the words.
Yes, I see it. Okay, so let's take a moment just to I have to get back into this Gemara, okay, by saying a quick word of introduction, and then we go on. Okay, anyone who has studied Midrash on a more than just what is the Midrash trying to teach us level, okay, it needs to understand that there was a certain format to drushes in the time of Chazal. And the format basically followed the fact that there would be a petichta, an opening statement, which was usually taken, okay, from another section of the Tanakh, okay, right? Almost always ksuvim, right? But not 100%, okay? And then the Baal Darshan, okay, would basically start with that pasuk, and he would darshan that pasuk basically then to bring it back to whatever was the week's parsha, okay, and then explain the parsha, and then give his what's called in fancy language his homily, okay, all right, his Musar message or his Torah message, okay? So we need to simply be familiar with that concept, all right? So that we can better appreciate what the Gemara is going through now. And most of Yud Amud Beis and the part of Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, okay? That it's citing for us examples of what the petichta, what the opening section was, okay, that they would use, and in some cases part of the drasha as well, in terms of if they were focusing on, whereas the main text was supposed to be connected with Megillas Esther. The Gemara goes on then, however, to tell us, well, what about their discussion of the Megillah, of the language of the Megillah itself, by then starting to discuss the first pasuk or the first two psukim or the first three psukim of Megillas Esther. Okay, so if we can consider that a short introduction and review, it will help us then understand what we're seeing here. Okay. All right. So if I'm correct in that case, then we're starting on Yud Amud Beis, the very last line in the middle of the line. Okay. That's where the new Gemara, where today's Gemara is going to start. Okay. All right. And again, I apologize. Two things. Number one, to those who were with us on the trip that we did not get to do yesterday's daf. Okay. And number two, the fact that I would have both prepared with Art Scroll and Koren for today's daf, but I only had easy access to one of them. Okay. All right. So if my is a little halting today, you'll understand. Rav Dimi bar Yitzchak, patach la pitcha lahai parshata. Okay, that Rav Dimi began his drasha. He started his opening with the following, right? Regarding this particular section. Remember, when it's saying this particular section, again, it's referring to Megillas Esther. Okay? Parshata mehacha from here. Where? Citing a pasuk. Ki avadim anachnu uba'avadotenu lo azavnu Elokeinu v'yet aleinu chesed lefnei malchei paras. Okay? So in other words, that was the pasuk that we were servants, etc. Hashem didn't believe us, basically, before the kings of Persia. Ematai, when? Bisman Haman, in the time of Haman. A new statement. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa patachla pitcha laha parshata mehacha. And where did he begin, Rabbi Chanina? His, right? Again, citing a pasuk. Hakav te'enosh l'roshenu banu ba'esh ubamayim. Okay? And notice he's going to do a slightly different approach. He's going to darshan each sections of his pasuk. Ba'esh b'yamei Nebuchadnezzar harasha, in the time of the wicked king Nebuchadnezzar. Ubamayim, what about that? B'yamei Paro, in the time of Pharaoh. Okay, now, why this particular reference? Aish, because he's referring to the fact that it was Nebuchadnezzar who threw the three guys, okay, into ready to go through the fire. Okay, all right, and Mayim, why? Because that tells us in terms of the exodus from Egypt, and they had to go through the water, through the splitting of the Red Sea. Vatotzi enu, throwing the babies, right, into the water, and that they would be punished likewise, right? Vatotzi enu l'ravacha b'yamei Haman, and he brought us out, okay, in the time of Haman. Rabbi Yochanan patachla pitcha laha parshata mehacha, and Rabbi Yochanan brought his opening for the portion of him here. Zachar chasto ve'amunato lebeit Yisrael ra'u kol afsei aretz et Yeshuat Eloheinu. Okay, so in other words, his approach is a little different. He cites his whole pasuk. Ematai ra'u kol afsei aretz et Yeshuat Elokeinu. When did they see the redemption of Hashem? B'yamei Mordechai ve'Esther. So that was his way of connecting it. Okay? Reish Lakish patach la pitcha laha parshata mehacha. And Reish Lakish brought his opening statement for this portion from here. Okay? Now again, notice, all right? Arei nohem v'dov shokek moshel rasha al am dal. Okay? So he's going to go back again to cite different sections of the pasuk, right?
It says the world saw that the Yeshua of Hashem, but it was very normal and natural for most people.
Right.
So the world wouldn't see it as
okay. So that gives you, just to answer or make a suggestion, which is a good comment, namely, if I remember correctly, there are differences of opinion of when Mashiach will come. Will there be certain kinds of changes in the world? And there are different viewpoints. And if you're interested in that topic, I suggest you can read on in terms of the difference between Rambam's view on that subject versus others. Okay. Okay. Because that would be a whole shiur in itself, session. That's just that topic. Okay. All right. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. Now, what does Reish Lakish do? Ari Nohem. Okay. He starts off the pasuk. What's the reference to the lion? Nebuchadnezzar Harasha. Why? Is it Nebuchadnezzar Bey? Because it's written about him. Allah Aye Misovcho, that the lion came up from its lair. Dov Shokek, that part of the pasuk. Ze Achashverosh, Dichtiv Bey. Why Achashverosh? Because it's written with him. Va'aro Chiva acharei tanina dameh ladov. Okay? Again, making a comparison to the bear. But Tani Rav Yosef, all right? And then we see, and Rav Yosef taught Elu Parsiim. Okay, so Rav Yosef was willing to accept the same pasuk that Reish Lakish used, but he's going to give it a different spin. Okay, what is his view? What is the bear compared to? Elu Parsim, it compares to the Persians. She'ochlin v'shotin kedov, because they eat and drink like bears. Umesubarlin basar kedov, and they're covered with hair. Their skin is covered with hair, like. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the next one. Umesubarlin basar, but they're chunky, heavy, dark, okay, like bears. Umegadlin se'ar kedov, and their hair grows, okay, hairy like bears. Ve'em lahem menucha kedov, and they don't have any rest. Like, in other words, the question is, do bears really sleep when they hibernate, or they only?
It's talking about when they're not hibernating,
right?
That they're constantly
looking for food.
They don't know, they don't have a wife who prepares dinner.
Thanks. Umoshe Rasha Zehaman, and the wicked ruler that is Haman. Amdal, what do we mean when it says the Amdal? Elu Yisrael Shehem Dalin Min HaMitzvot. And that refers to the Jewish people who are lacking, so to speak. Okay, so Rabbi Yosef says the Persians were covered with flesh and hairy and always on the attack, always on the move, so to speak, versus against Israel who were lacking in mitzvah. Rabbi Elazar patach lapitcha laha parshat mehacha. Okay, Ted, we're about a quarter of the page down in 11a. Okay, all right. So what happens? Laha parshata ba'atzaltayim yamei hamikara ubeshvalut yadayim yidlof habayit. Okay, I'm not even going to try to translate the passage. All right. B'shvil atzelut shahaya lehem v'Yisrael. Laziness, their lack again of observance of mitzvot, right? To Israel, shalo asku b'Torah. In other words, they were not diligent in Torah study, all right? Shalo asku b'Torah ne'aseh sunav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And here, this is a euphemism for the Kadosh Baruch Hu himself, okay? That it allowed the Kadosh Baruch Hu, mach. One translation is to be weak, okay? All right, and that was Art Scroll's translation, if I remember. All right, although others want to use the word poor, okay, in other words, lacking in power in some ways. Okay, but in any case, let's use weak, the Art Scroll. That was based on Rashi. Okay, all right. Mach, why? Ve'ein mach ela ani. All right, and here we get that connection that we mean weak when we say poor. Shnei amar. That if he's if he's weak, he's poor from value. Mikra Baruch Hu. And here the source is the Kodesh Baruch Hu Shnei Amar. Right? In other words, the idea is the roof would be the protector. Okay? So in this case, the concept is Hashem, okay, did not have, was weak, was not the appropriate protector himself, and allowed Israel to suffer, in a sense, to be subjugated. All right? Next, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak patach lapitcha laha parshata mehacha. He began his drasha from following. Right? So here's clearly an example of taking it from a book in Ketuvim, from Tehillim. Okay. By the way, we should know, just as a quick aside, we all know that there are 5 books of Tehillim. Okay, to correspond to 5 Chumshei Torah. Okay, so in other words, that seems to tell us that at some point in time there was a system based where, just as we read the 5 books of Torah, okay, there were parallel Tehillim read. Okay, So at one point, not only did they read Torah and Nevi'im, they read Torah, Nevi'im, and something from Ketuvim as well on a regular Shabbos basis. And oftentimes that was the pasuk that was chosen as the Peticha for the drasha from that section. Okay? All right, so now we come, all right? So what pasuk did he said from the Shir Hamalot? Right? Shir Hamalot Lulei Hashem Shahaya Lanu Yomar Na Yisrael. Okay, so that pasuk, Lulei Hashem Shahaya Lanu, that continues the pasuk. Right, okay. Shahaya Lanu Bekum Aleinu Adam, Adam Velo Melech. Okay, why do we say here a person and not a king? Okay, the implication being that a king, okay, Art Scroll here had a nice explanation, I felt at least, that a king normally would be hesitant to try to totally destroy, okay, to demolish an entire group of people, okay, because that could cause a stirring up of other populations, thinking, well, if he destroys this population, maybe we're going to be next. So a king would be more hesitant, but the average person who takes a role as a demagogue, okay, as in the example of Haman, would therefore be less inclined to worry about taking out, an entire population of the entire empire. Okay, so I thought that was, I don't know if that was Rashi. I think it was Maharshal. Maharal. That's what I thought. Okay, that was that's a good another example. Yeah. Okay. Adam v'lo melech. Rabba patach la pitcha laha pershata mehacha. From here, says Rabba. Okay. Brabot tzadikim yismach ha'am v'mosho rasha yanach am brabo. Again, tzadikim yismach ha'am ze Mordechai ve'Esther. How do we know that the righteous are Mordechai and Esther? Because it's written dichtiv va'ir shushan sahala v'samecha. Because the tzadikim are joyful, right? U'b'mosho rasha yanacham, and that the people suffered under the hands of the wicked. Zehaman dichtiv v'ha'ir shushan navocha. Okay, that the city of was befuddled. Okay, right? Dismayed.
Befuddled is good.
Right? Okay. Rav Matna Amar Mehacha. Rav Matna gave the following: Kimi goy gadol asher lo Elohim krovim elav. The nation that the deity is close to him. Okay. Rav Ashi Amar Mehacha. Rav Ashi says follows: O Hanisa Elohim vago, or Hashem vagomer, or Hashem is going to try the nation. Okay. So that gives us examples of Peticha. We now go to another format, right?
Word by word.
Exactly. So now remember the pasuk Megillah starts Vahi b'mei Achashverosh hu Achashverosh ha'amolech mehodu v'ad kush sheva ve'esrim shana, etc. Okay. So now we're going to take the first pasuk of the Megillah, and they're going to darshan individual words or sections from the first pasuk. Okay. So we start off citing the pasuk Vahi b'mei Achashverosh Amar Rav. Says Rav, we'll take the word Vayehi and we'll divide it into two parts. Voy and okay. In other words, woe. Okay. Va'ait, Vahi, Chada. Okay. So each one could be a separate part. Woe and a sign of mourning, wailing. Chada dichtiv, right? So once it's a vihit marchatem sham la'oivecha la'avadim l'shvachot, the gomer. Okay, carried out against the enemies and servants, right? Ushmuel aman. Shmuel says, lo ma'astim v'lo ga'altim l'chalotam. Okay, he did not. Shmuel's pasuk Okay, again, a different pasuk, but saying he didn't hold back, didn't save, etc., to allow them to be annihilated. What does that mean? Lo ma'astim, he did not, in a sense, prevent them. B'yemei Yevanim, at the time of the Greeks. V'lo ge'altim, b'yemei Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, and he didn't save them at the time of Nebuchadnezzar. So Shmuel is taking a little bit more of a historical, given various times. If we think of history, there was the Greek Empire, then afterwards the Persian, right? Alexander the Great, who conquered the world. His empire was split. Okay, then the Persian, right? Nebuchadnezzar.
No, the Persians were
Persians
first.
were first, and then the Greeks, right?
Persians were with the
We'll get to that later. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar, the Chalotam, B'yamei Haman, in the time of Haman. Lahafer Briti Itam, right, going on to further, right? B'yamei Parsiim, in the times of the Persians. Ki ani Hashem Okechem, B'yamei Gog Umagog. In other words, implying that ultimately in the future there will be a time of redemption. Okay? But matnita Tana, and in a Mishnah they taught, Lo Ma'astim B'yamei Kasdim, that they did not, in the time of the Chaldees. Shehamadati lahem Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Okay, that I established that the four of them. Velo Ga'altim B'yamei Yevanim. Okay, and when it says I didn't redeem them in the time of the Greeks, what happened? Shehamadati lahem Shimon HaTzadik, V'chashmonai, Ubanav, Umatitya, Kohen Gadol. Okay, but compared to them, time of the Greeks, I did bring something of a redemption. Okay, by Shimon HaTzadik and the Hasmoneans. Okay, L'chalotam b'yamei Haman, and as regards to Haman, shehamadati lahem Mordechai ve'Esther, that I brought them Mordechai and Esther. Okay, lahafer briti. Okay, itam b'yamei Parseim. Okay, to cancel, all right, or destroy my covenant. Or some b'yamei Parseim. Right. So what does it mean to destroy or rip the covenant? Right. The time of the Persians, shehamadati lahem shel bayit Rebbe v'chachmei Dora. Okay. But in other words, what happened? Even in the time of later, there were those who maybe they did not bring about a, let's say for the moment, a physical saving of the Jewish people. They brought about a spiritual saving of the Jewish people. Right? Ki ani Hashem Elohechem la'atid lavo she'ein kol umah v'lashon yuchala lishlot bahem. Okay, so that was his explanation. All right, that Hashem will guarantee that there ultimately will not be a nation to rule over the Jewish people. We keep going. Rabbi Levi Amar mehacha, from here, v'im lo torishu et yoshvei haaretz, citing the pasuk, right? If they don't have inhabitants of the land, Rabbi Chia Amar mehacha, from here, v'haya ka'asher dimiti la'asod lahem e'eseh lachem. Okay, again, Achashverosh Amar. Okay, so now we have if that was all Vayhi, then we continue with the word Achashverosh. Amar Rav Achiv.
Achashverosh, what is that word?
Right, that's the next word in the pasuk. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, etc., etc. Okay, so what happens? Amar Rav Achiv. Okay, so they're darshaning the word Achashverosh, and they're going to divide it up into two parts. Okay, Amar Rav, says Rav, Achiv Shel Rosh, the brother of the head. Uven Gilo Shel Rosh, and he was a contemporary, a one who had the same midos as, okay, the head. Okay, Shel Rosh, Achiv, as Nebuchadnezzar. So he was the brother of Nebuchadnezzar, a relative of Nebuchadnezzar, or he had the same behaviors as Nebuchadnezzar. Shel Rosh, Achiv, Shel Nebuchadnezzar, Harasha, of the wicked. Shenekra Rosh, who is called the head. Sheneamar, Anatu Resha, Didahava, Ben Gilo Shoroshu. Okay, so furthermore, so the first pasuk was from Daniel, that he was like the one who had the golden crown on his head. Ben Gilo Shorosh, that he had the behaviors like Nebuchadnezzar, who harag, who bikesh laharog. Nebuchadnezzar killed, Achashverosh wanted to kill them. Who hechriv, who bikesh lahachriv. He destroyed, he wanted to destroy the Jewish people. Shneamar u'b'malchut Achashverosh v'tchilat malchuto kadvu sitna al yoshvei Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. Okay, that his decrees went out to cause concern and fear among the Jewish people. U'Shmuel Amar, so Shmuel, Hushcharu pneihem shal Yisrael b'yamav kishulei kadeira, that he darkened the faces of the Jewish people like it was the bottom of a pot. Okay, the Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Kol shezochro Amar ach l'rosho. Okay, anyone who remembers him says he's like again a brother to the head, again to Nebuchadnezzar. The Rebbe Chanina Amar shehakol me'asu rashin b'yamav. All were wicked in his day. Shnei Amar v'yasam hamelech Achashverosh mas. Okay, that he made this tax. Who Achashverosh? Okay, he is Achashverosh. Who Birash? Oh, he in his wickedness. Mitchilato v'ad sofo, from beginning to end. Okay, in other words, the same way initially the Ad Scroll's explanation, I believe, citing Rashi, was the same way he objected, okay, to the Jews rebuilding the temple in an earlier time. Okay, later he, okay, even though he may not have been the ruler at that time, nevertheless, later on when he was the ruler, he attempted to destroy them.
At least he was consistent.
Who asuhu pershao mitchilat v'yatzofo. Who Datan va'aviran hein berishan. Okay, like Datan and Aviran, they were wicked mitchilatan va'ad sofan, from the beginning to the end. Who Hamelech Achaz, and likewise King Achaz was wicked from the beginning to the end. Who birish'o mitchilato va'ad sofo. Okay, Achaz was a king that he did not, want the people to follow Torah appropriately. All right. Avram, on the opposite hand, who Avraham, who b'tzidko mitchilato va'ad sofo. Avram was Avraham, who was righteous from beginning to end. Who Aharon, who Moshe, hein b'tzidkan mitchilatan va'ad sofan. And Moshe and Aaron were righteous from beginning to end. V'David, who Hakatan, okay, who mikatnuto b'tchilato va'ad sofan. And David was
Humble.
I was going to say humble is a good translation. Okay, he made himself small in a sense. Okay, he debased himself. Okay, all right, in a sense. Okay, from beginning to end. Kashem shebekatnuto hakatan, because in his humility, in his debasing atzmo, etzu misha gadol mimenu b'Torah. Okay, in other words, somebody implying that he made himself such that he was a student of someone who was greater than him in Torah learning. Kach b'malchuto iktin atzmo etzel misha gadol mimenu b'chachma. So likewise, when he was king, he also accepted the learning and guidance of somebody who was greater than him in learning, in wisdom. Hamolech. Okay, that's the next pasuk from the first next word in the first pasuk of Megillah, right? Okay, Amar Rav, says Rav Shemalach me'atzmo, that he ruled on his own. In other words, he didn't inherit. Okay, right? He didn't inherit the monarchy. He either usurped it or he paid for it. We're going to see, right? Amrei la, as I said, all right? The shevach, some said it was for praise. The amrei la lignai, and some said this was with disdain. Amrei la l'shvach, those who said it regarding praise. the lohava inish the chashiv lamalka kivate, that there was no one else who was considered worthy, so to speak, of being given the monarchy. All right. Va'amre la l'gnai, and some saying it was negative, the lohava chaze l'malchuta, that he wasn't worthy of being the king, right? Umamona yatirahu diahav, and he took care of it. He bought the position, okay, with a lot of money, right? Vakam, okay. So next, okay, and then became the king. Mehodu va'ad Kush, from one area of another, from like India to Ethiopia. In other words, the entire Middle East. Okay, Rav Ushmuel. According to Rav and Shmuel, they had a little bit of a difference of opinion here on what was meant. Chad Amar Hodu B'sof Ha'olam, V'Kush B'sof Ha'olam. One said Hodu was in one, India was in one end of the world, and Ethiopia another end of the world. V'Chad Amar Hodu V'Kush Gabe Hadade Havu Kaime. Okay, that they were near each other, right? Kashem Shemalach al Hodu, the Kush, the same way he ruled over, okay, these two major population centers, Hachmalach Misof Ha'olam Ba'ad Sofo. So likewise, he ruled throughout the entire empire. Kiyotse B'davar, and in a similar manner, Ata Omer, you say as follows, Ki Hava Rodeh B'chol Avar Ever Hanahar Mitifsach Va'ad Aza. Okay, the same way you say he could have ruled over the entire, both sides of the river. In other words, the Tigris Euphrates area. Okay, right, from one area from one large city to another. Okay, so in other words, who else could have ruled from one large area to another? Okay, perhaps it was Solomon, right? Rav Ushmuel Chadamar Tifsach B'sof Ha'olam Va'aza B'sof Ha'olam. One said Tifsach was one end of the empire, and the other, Aza was in the other end of the empire. V'chadamar Tifsach Va'aza Bahadi Hadadi Havu Kaime Kashem Shemalach al Tifsach Va'al Aza Kach Malach al Kol Ha'olam Kulo. The same way he ruled, no, the two cities were together, and the same way he ruled strongly over them, he ruled over the entire empire. Okay, let's go on. We now get to a next, from that first pasuk, the next couple of words, okay, where it defines how large was the empire. Okay, Sheva ve'esrim u'me'ah medina, 7 and 20 and 100 provinces. Okay, why phrase it in that order? Okay, was the part of the question. Amar Rav Chisda, B'tchila malach al Sheva, levasof malach al Esrim, levasof malach al Me'ah. First he ruled on 7, then he ruled on 20, then he ruled on 100. Ela Me'ata, if that's how you're going to darshan it, okay, what about another pasuk that gives somewhat similar numerical designation, right? Ushnei Chayev, the years of the life of Amram, Sheva Ushloshim Uma'at Shana. Okay, we read that as normally 137, right? Shana. My Darshat Bay. Okay, how come? How are you going to expound that? Okay, you're going to do it the same way you expounded the other number. Okay, right? What happens? Right? Shani Hacha, that's different. The Kraya Terahu. Why? Because there's an additional pasuk. Mechdei Kativ, since it's written, Mehodu vi'ad Kush, Sheva ve'esrimu me'ah medina, Lamali. Why then did I have to add, if you say on the one hand, from here to here, why had a number of specific provinces, right? Lamali Shmamina B'darsha. It was written there specifically for expounding purposes. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan, a new Braita, Shlosha Malchu B'kefifa. 3 of them ruled the world, okay, like an arch. In other words, from as if heaven covers the entire world, so they whirled the entire world. These three, from one end to another. That's the implication. Ve'elu hein, and they are Achav, number one, Achashverosh, number two, Nebuchadnezzar, number three. Achav, why Achav? Dichtiv, okay, Chai Hashem Elokecha, Im Yesh Goy Umamlacha, Asher Lo Shalach Adoni Sham, Levakeshcha, Vagomer. Okay, in other words, the nation sent representatives to him, so implying he ruled a large area. Okay, Ve'ilo Dahava Malich Alaihu, Hechi Matse Mishvalaho. And if he didn't rule over them, why would they come and have people come and take oaths to him? Okay, Nebuchadnezzar, says the king, Dichtiv, Vahaya Hagoy, Vahamamlacha Asher Lo Yitain, Et Savaro Be'ol Melech Bavel. Okay, that to the nation or the king that didn't bow their neck, so to speak, or take on the yoke of the king of Babylonia. Okay, in other words, they accepted his sovereignty. Achashverosh, Hada Amran. Okay, as we've said already. So Gemara wants us to continue. Okay, I know we started a few minutes late this morning. V'siman shesadach. Okay, but wait a second, says the Gemara. We have a mnemonic device that reminds us of four other rulers: Shlomo, Sanchariv, Daryovesh, and Koresh. Okay, how about these four? Didn't they also rule large empires? So we're going to see Vatu Leka and no others. Okay, what about these four? Compared to the three that we just mentioned. Right? Right? Vaha Ika Shlomo, but what about Solomon? Lo Salik Malchute, okay, that didn't leave his kingship. Hanich Leman Damar, he didn't complete his kingship. Right? So let's see it. Hanicha, that's okay. Leman Damar Malach Vehedyot, to the ones who said he had been ruled and then he became a common person. He was deposed. Ela Leman Damar Malach Vehedyot Umalach, but the one who said he was king and then became a commoner and then regained his sovereignty, regained his kingship. Ma'ika Lamema, what are you going to say? It says to Shlomo, Milta Achrite Hava Bey. There was a different thing with Shlomo. Shemalach al ha'elyonim va'al ha'tachtonim. That Solomon, when he was king, both ruled the upper regions and the lower regions. In other words, his wisdom was such that he could control the demons and the angels, etc. Right? Shneamar v'yashav Shlomo al kisei Hashem. Okay.
You had a vertical kingdom.
Okay. So then a horizontal. All right. Vaha hava Sanchariv. But here we had Sanchariv. Dichtiv, why? Because it's written, Mi bechol Elogei Elohei haratzot, ha'ele asher hitzilu et artzam miyadi. Who from all the gods will save these nations from? Okay, ha'ika Yerushalayim, delo kavsha. But what about the fact that Sennacherib never conquered Jerusalem? So therefore he didn't rule over the entire empire, the entire world. Okay? Vaha'ika Daryavesh. And then there was Darius. Dichtiv, as was written, Daryavesh Malka. Daryavesh the king, Katav l'chol Amamya, Umya Velishna, Di Dairan b'chol Ara, Shalmolchon Yeska. That he wrote to every nation, okay, every people according to their language where they dwelled in the empire, so to speak. Okay, ha'ika sheva, delo malach alayhu. But there were seven who didn't. He didn't. Seven locations that he didn't rule over. Dichtiv, right? Shafar kadam daryavesh veikim al malchuta la'ach chashtarpanaya ma'av ve'esrim. Okay, so again, that indicating that there were seven places that he did never. conquered.
governors. So there
Right,
was
so he didn't have the same number. Vaha'ike Koresh, but then there was Koresh, Cyrus. Dichtiv ka'amar Koresh melech Paras kol mamlechot haaretz natan li Hashem. Okay, that Hashem gave me all the kingdoms of the land, of the world, right? V'hatam eshtabachai ha'deka mishtabach benafshe. No, there he was simply bragging, so to speak. He was priding himself. Okay. All right, now a new piece. Again, still citing the Megillah as we continue, right? Biyamim hahem keshevet hamelech. In those days when the king was, so to speak, ruling. Okay, uktiv batrai, and it was written after that. Bishnat shalosh l'malko, in the 3rd year of his reign. So that seems to be a contradiction here. Amar Rava, in other words, how do we deal with, on the one hand, it says he was ruling, and then later on it says, doesn't refer to the 3 years later. Amar Rava, says Rava, Mike Shevet, what do we mean by the phrase that he was Keshevet, he was in place, ruling in place? La'achar shenit yashva da'ato. Okay, after he became more settled, so to speak. All right. Amar Belshazzar. Okay, what it said, Belshazzar says, Chashav v'ta'ah. Okay, so what did he? What was his view?
This is all Achashverosh talking.
Right. So Achashverosh is thinking of the following: the king that preceded me was Belshazzar. And when he tried to figure out when the Jewish people were going to be redeemed, he made an arithmetic error. Okay, in other words, he counted from the wrong time. Why? Because we understand that it was supposed to be clearly 70 years. Okay, that's what we get from, if I remember correct, correct me if I'm wrong, Yirmiyahu, right? So if it's 70 years, the question is, when do you start counting? At what point does the 70 years begin? At what point does the 70 years come to fruition? Okay, so given that we understand that's the concept, Achashverosh is saying Belshazzar made an error in his count. Why? We're going to see now as the Gemara continues. Okay, what was the error? All right. Ana chashvina velotan. Achashverosh says, I will make the cheshbon, I'll do the math, but I won't make a mistake. That's true. Maihi, what was it? Dichtiv, as it's written, ki lefim laot lebavel shiv'im shana efkodetchem, because it says, according to the completement, the fulfillment of Babylonia, 70 years, I will count for you. I will redeem you.
I will remember you.
Okay,
at the end of
right.
70 years.
Pakad meaning I'll remember and therefore ultimately redeem the Jewish people. Okay, so that's the pasuk from Yirmiyahu. Okay, uktiv, and then it's written lemalot lecharavot Yerushalayim shiv'im shana. Okay, again to complete or to finish the destruction of Jerusalem. In other words, after the destruction, after the Jerusalem. Okay, so that we have another pasuk, right? 70 years following the destruction of Jerusalem, Shivim Shana, 70 years. Chashuv, Arba'in v'chamesh, the Nebuchadnezzar. So how do we figure that? He says, first figure the 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar.
This is Belshazzar's.
This was his erroneous math, Belshazzar. Okay, so Achashverosh is saying, where did Belshazzar make the mistake? Okay, to try to come up to 7. He thought Belshazzar the following: 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar, ve'esrim utlat, okay, the Evil Marduk, and 23 of Evil Marduk. This is the next king. V'tarte didei, and 3 of his own years. I'm sorry, 2 of Belshazzar, Hashivim. That gives you 70, right? That's the number. Okay, so what did he do? Thinking that the Jews were not redeemed. What did Belshazzar do then? Okay, Apik Mane Tebei Mikdasha. He took out the utensils from the Beis Hamikdash, right? Ve'eshtamesh baho, and he used them, okay, for that big fancy dinner, right, as a victory over the Jews. Okay, so now we get the following mathematical issues. All right, Nebuchadnezzar minalan da'arba'in v'chamesh shanin malach. How do we know that Nebuchadnezzar ruled 45 years, right? Da'amarma, as the master said, galu b'shiv'ah. They were exiled in the 7th. Okay, galu b'shmona. Some were exiled in the 8th. Galu b'shmona esrei. Some were exiled in the 18th. Galu b'tisha esrei. And some were exiled in the 19th. What does that mean? So he figured. Galu b'sheva l'kibush Yehoyakim. Galut Yehoyachim. Okay, they were exiled in the 7th year, following the conquering of Yehoyakim, which was the exile of Yehoyachim.
He was allowed to be a vassal.
Right. We'll get to it in a second. Okay, so what happened? He was conquered. He was put in prison. Okay, and he had to be there. All right. Shehu Shmona leNebuchadnezzar. That was the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar. Right. Galu Shmona, that those were exiled in the 8th year. All right. Shmona Esrei on the 18th. The Kibush Yehoyakim. That was the conquering of Yehoyakim. Galut Tzidkiyahu. Shahid Shah Esrei, the exile of Tzidkiyahu, well, that was the 19th year of the Nebuchadnezzar. The Amar Mar, okay, as the master said, Shana Rishona Kivesh Ninveh. The first year he conquered Ninveh. Shniya Kivesh Yehoyakim. The next year, 2nd year, he conquered Yehoyakim. Uktiv Vahi Bishloshim V'Sheva Shana Legalut Yehoyachim, and then it's written in the 37th year of the exile of Yehoyachim, Melech Yehuda, the king of Judah, B'shnei Masar Chodesh, on the 12th month, Be'esrim B'chamisha Chodesh, on the 25th day of the month. Nasa Avil Merodek, Melech Bavel, King Avil Merodek, king of Babylonia, B'shnat Malchuto, in his kingdom, at Rosh Yehoyachim, okay, Melech Yehuda, V'yotzei Otomi Beit Hakela. Okay, so he took him out of prison and allowed him more still subjugated, but not as a prisoner, okay, of the king, but okay, is still then, right?
So this is when Evil Marduk was inaugurated, and he had freed the political prisoners.
Right. Okay. Tell me Beit Hakel. Okay. Tamne. All right. So now we have right. Me Beit Hakel. Tamne. That's 8
years.
Right. Utzlotin. All right. Vesheva. Okay. 37. All right. Hare Arba'im V'Chamesh to Nebuchadnezzar. That gives us the 45 of Nebuchadnezzar. Ve'esrim utflat, the evil Marduk Gamra. Okay, and the 23 of evil Marduk we learned. V'tarte didei, okay, and the 3 of what? 2. I'm sorry. The 2 okay, and the 2 of Achashverosh, right? Right? Of Belshazzar, Hashivin. Those make 70. Okay. Amar, he says, no. Hashta, Vadai, to Lemifrake. See, still, Okay, they're no longer redeemed. What did he do? Afik mane the Bei Mikdashah. He took again out the utensils, took out the utensils of the Beis Hamikdash, v'ishtamesh bahom, and used them. Hainu dekamar le Daniel, and this is when Daniel said to him, Va'al mari shemaya ha'atromamamta u'lema'anaya debei baite potiru kadmach. Again, that Daniel sort of warned him that in his youth, that he angered the God of heaven,
Bigger than God himself.
right? And therefore, by using the utensils from the Beis Hamikdash. Okay? Tiv Bey. Okay, and it was written, Valelia Katil Belshazzar Malka. Okay?
He was killed that night.
So that very night, okay, that he had this fancy banquet using the stuff of the Beis Hamikdash, okay, he was deposed, killed, right? Uktiv, okay, and then it's written, Daryavesh, okay, Meda'at, and Daryavesh the Mede, okay, Kibal Malchute, okay, and he received the sovereignty, the kingship, Kibar Shanin Shitin Vatartin, when he was at the age of what, 62, something like that. Amar Ihu Mita'atai, and he said then, he made errors, Ana Chashivna Velotaina. I will do the math and I won't make the errors. Mikativ the Malchut Bavel. Do we really say that the pasuk that they referred to 70 years was based on the time that Babylonia was an empire, a kingship? Okay, Lebavel Kativ. The pasuk only said regarding Babylonia, right? Okay, my Lebavel, Legalut Bavel. Okay, when they were exiled to Babylonia. Now, think of it for just a quick moment, and then we'll jump back in. How many exiles to Babylonia were there? One, exactly. One could argue that there were two. There was an earlier exile that took Yehoiachin and many of the leaders and brought them to Babylonia, okay, where they ultimately established a Jewish community in Babylonia. And then years later, okay, years later, that was when there was really the destruction of the temple, and that's when the
destruction of the
city.
The temple was destroyed at the beginning.
Again, and then later, okay, so those who were, in a sense, in that I'm going to put in quotations, the second exile, okay, or the larger exile, okay, in a sense, they went to Babylonia, where there was an existing Jewish community, in a sense, okay. So we need to sort of keep that in mind. Do we really say there were two, or do we say really there was only one? I don't disagree with you. Historically, we would say there was two. Okay? All right. So I want us to understand that as we finish up now. All right? So Bavel, all right? My lebavel legalut bavel. Kama b'tzidan. So what do we reduce the number? Okay, tamne, right? We reduce it by 8. Chashiv va'ayil chilufayhu. So let's consider it, and we'll remove it. We'll switch it around. Chada the Belshazzar. 1 to do Belshazzar. V'chamesh the Daryavesh v'Koresh. And 5 from Darius and Koresh. V'tarte didei hashivan. And 2 from Achashverosh, Belshazzar, I'm sorry. Right, here that's 7.
No, this is now
Achashverosh figuring.
Whose party is the beginning of his third
right,
year.
Third year. So
I
2 years already, I'll reduce those. Kevan dechaze demalu shiv'in v'lo ipruk. Since he saw that 70 years, according to his calculations, had passed, and again the Jewish people were still not redeemed, right? Amar hashta vadai tu lo mifrake. Certainly they're not going to be redeemed. What did they do? Afik mani debe mikdasha. I will remove the utensils from the Beis HaMikdash, ve'eshtamesh baho, and I will use them. What happened? Basatan v'riked b'nehem v'harag et Vashti. Okay, came Satan, danced among them, and killed Vashti. So according to this Masorah, okay, why was Vashti killed? She was the daughter of Belshazzar, granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, she was, so to speak, the claim of legitimacy for Achashverosh to the throne. Okay,
she was the only surviving.
So
child
therefore
of
that-
Belshazzar.
that was the only sprite child of Belshazzar. So that wiped out that entire line.
The vessels were taken out twice from the Beis HaMikdash?
Yeah, once by Belshazzar and
Once by,
by Achashverosh. They were
Achashverosh.
all in Babel. They took everything with
Right.
them. And
Okay,
it was in storage, but he said,
right? He took it right. So what happens? So we see what goes on, right? V'harag Vashti, v'hashapir chashiv, and here he thought he was accurate, right? He was thinking well. Ihunami mit abatai. He also made mistakes. The abayele lemanyane. Why? Because he should have counted mecharvot Yerushalayim, from the destruction of Jerusalem. So sof kama betzidan. Therefore, how much should he have reduced it by? Chadisar, 11. Right? Ihu kama malach. So how long did he rule? Arbeisar, 14. Arbeisar didei ibayile lemivne beit hamikdash. Okay, so if that's the case in the 14th year, okay, we should have been built the Beis HaMikdash. Alma Kativ, why is it written? Ba'adin batlet avodat beit alha to Yerushalayim. Okay, why? Somebody help me out here. Okay, Ba'idin bitlat. Okay, in that time they stopped the work. Why? Because remember, what happened was the Samaritans and others complained to royalty, okay, and therefore they had to stop working on the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash in the city and things like that. Okay, and I think that might be a good place. Well, just a couple words. Amar Rava Shnayim Mekutaot Havu. Okay.
We learned earlier that if a king once the first day of his next year is called a year.
Right. So in other
So
words,
you had
since
one day
Darius
from
and
Belshazzar.
Cyrus were really a total of 5 years, so there was partly one part of a year for one, part of the year the other. That was only considered a single year.
And they credit Achashverosh with the next
Yeah.
year, so that's a total of 2.
Okay, and we'll stop there. I hope so. I'll let you. What? Okay, you go ahead. Okay. All right,
I'll take
everybody.
it.
All right. Okay. Yes, sir.
This says here,
Yeah.
Melcha Morris at
At
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock
Is that
today.
in this room?
No, that will be in the base medrash downstairs.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure thing. Okay.
Welcome back.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, historical.